Ambassador Kang Taemin walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers. His black diplomatic suit was perfectly pressed, and his smile was warm and friendly. Behind him, 6 other humans followed in a neat line. They all looked calm and respectful, just like they had for the past 3 years. The chamber was huge. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds could form inside. Thousands of seats filled the circular room, each one designed for a different alien species. Some seats had water tanks for the fish-like beings. Others had heat lamps for the cold-blooded reptiles. A few seats hung from the ceiling for the flying creatures. Dr. Park Sora adjusted her glasses and looked around the room. She was the human expert on alien life forms. Today she wore her best lab coat over a simple blue dress. She had spent years learning about each species in this room. She knew what they ate, how they slept, and what made them happy or angry. This knowledge had helped humanity make friends with many of them. Captain Lee Junho stood straight and tall in his military dress uniform. His chest was covered with medals, but they were small and quiet ones. Nothing too flashy. Humans had learned that showing off made the other species nervous. Lee had fought in 3 wars before joining the diplomatic team. Now he spent his time smiling and shaking hands with creatures that could crush him with one finger. The reptilian Vorthek representative slithered over to greet them. His scales were bright green today, which meant he was in a good mood. Dr. Park knew this from her studies. She smiled and bowed slightly. "Honored Vorthek Cecil," she said. "Your scales shine beautifully today. The green color suits the important business we discuss." The big reptile's eyes brightened. He liked compliments about his scales. "Thank you, small human doctor. Your words warm my cold blood." Near the center of the room, Communications Officer Kim Min-ji was setting up her equipment. She was young, maybe 25 years old, with short black hair and quick fingers. Her job was to record everything that happened and send reports back to Earth. She also listened to the radio chatter between different alien groups. Sometimes she heard interesting things that the other species didn't want humans to know. Today, Kim had heard something that made her stomach feel tight with worry. But she kept her face calm and professional. That was the human way in these meetings. The insectoid Hive Queen's envoy clicked over to them on 6 legs. The creature looked like a giant ant wearing a golden crown. Captain Lee bowed respectfully. "Great. Hive Speaker," Lee said, "we are honored by your presence." The young creature's antennae twitched with pleasure. "Human Captain Lee Junho, your species continues to show proper respect. The Queen is pleased." Engineer Cho Sung-min watched from the visitors' gallery above. He was not part of the diplomatic team, but he wanted to see how these meetings worked. Cho was a practical man who built things with his hands. He didn't understand all the fancy words and careful dancing that happened in politics, but he understood people, even alien people. And right now, he could see that something was wrong. The human diplomats were being too careful. Their smiles were too bright. Their bows were too deep. It reminded him of workers he had seen who were afraid of losing their jobs. They work extra hard and said, "Yes, sir," too many times because they were scared. Ambassador Kang took his place at the human delegation's table. It was smaller than the other tables and placed slightly behind the main circle. This was supposed to show that humans were still the junior species in the council. They had accepted this position because they wanted to fit in and make friends. Dr. Yoon Hae-won, the human historian, sat down next to Kang. She was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She carried a tablet computer that held thousands of years of human history. But more importantly, it also held detailed records of everything that had happened in the council for the past 3 years. She remembered every promise made and every deal broken. The council session began with the usual ceremonies. Each species sang their traditional greeting song or performed their ritual dance. Humans had been asked to participate, so they stood and sang a simple folk song from Korea. Their voices were clear and pleasant. Several alien species nodded their approval. Then the real business started. Counselor Veltar of the Depths rose from his water-filled seat. He was like a giant octopus with too many arms and eyes that never blinked. His voice came through a water-filled speaker that made everything sound wet and cold. Today we discuss the human request for expanded mining rights in the Outer Rim territories, Veltar announced. This matter has been under careful consideration for many months, Ambassador Kong stood up. Honored counselors, humanity is grateful for your consideration. We have prepared detailed environmental impact studies and safety protocols for your review. Yes, Veltar waved several arms dismissively. We have seen your paperwork, very thorough, very human. Some of the other council members made sounds that might have been laughter. Dr. Park kept her smile in place, but her hands tightened slightly on her notebook. Medical Officer Rumi Young sat in the back row of the human section. She was supposed to be there in case anyone got sick during the long meeting. But really, she was there because she had been asking questions about medical supply shipments to human colonies. The answers she got didn't make sense. Supplies that should take 2 weeks to deliver were taking 2 months. People were getting sick and dying while their medicine sat in council. Warehouses waiting for additional safety inspections, the crystalline fragment representative began to speak. Councillor Thexani looked like a walking diamond, all sharp edges and rainbow reflections. When he talked, his voice sounded like breaking glass. The Fragment Collective has concerns about human expansion rates, Thexani said. Young species often grow too fast, like weeds in a garden. Sometimes weeds must be controlled. Security Chief Lim Dongwook shifted in his seat. He was a quiet man who noticed everything and said very little. Right now he was noticing that several council species were looking at the humans with expressions he didn't like. It wasn't fear or respect. It was the look a farmer gives to chickens before dinner time. Ambassador Kong's smile never wavered. We understand the council's concerns. Humanity is willing to accept whatever limitations you deem necessary. We only ask for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of your trust. Patience is a virtue among civilized beings, Veltar replied. Perhaps in another decade when humanity has proven its stability. We can revisit this matter. Kim Minji's fingers stopped moving over her keyboard. Another decade? She had been monitoring subspace communications for weeks. She knew that some human colonies were running out of basic supplies. A decade was too long. People would die waiting that long. She looked at Ambassador Kong and saw something that made her heart skip. For just a moment, his diplomatic smile had slipped. Underneath, she saw something else. Something hard and cold and very patient. A patience, Kim realized, was not the same thing as weakness. And humanity's patience was starting to run out. The council session had been going on for 2 hours. Ambassador Kang sat in his chair, still smiling, still polite. But Dr. Park noticed that his right hand was tapping silently on the table. It was a small movement, barely visible. She had worked with Kang for 3 years and knew this meant he was thinking hard about something. Counselor, Thexani stood up from his crystal seat. The light in the chamber bent around his diamond-like body, creating rainbow patterns on the walls. When he spoke, his voice cut through the air like broken glass. The Fragment Collective has discovered disturbing evidence about human activities, he announced. Several council members leaned forward in their seats. We have proof that human mining operations have been destroying sacred sites in the Outer Rim. A murmur went through the chamber. Some aliens made clicking sounds. Others hissed or chirped. The noise meant they were shocked and angry. Dr. Yoon Hae-won looked up from her tablet computer. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her kind eyes were now sharp with attention. She had been the head of the human survey teams for 5 years. She knew every rock and asteroid in the Outer Rim territories. There were no sacred sites in the areas humans had been mining. Thexani activated a holographic display above the center of the chamber. Images appeared in the air showing mining equipment and deep holes in asteroid surfaces. These sites were blessed by the fragment ancestors over 1,000 years ago. The human machines have torn through them without care or respect. Captain Lee Junho stood up slowly. His military training told him to stay calm, but his jaw was tight. Counselor Thexani, we were not informed of any sacred sites in our assigned mining areas. Our surveys showed only empty asteroids with no previous claims. Are you calling the Fragment Collective liars? Thexani's crystal body flashed with angry red light. The chamber went completely silent. Even the air circulation system seemed to stop working. This was a trap, and everyone knew it. If the humans said yes, they would be accused of insulting the Fragment Collective. If they said no, they would be admitting to destroying sacred sites. Engineer Cho Seung-min watched from the gallery above. He had built mining equipment for 15 years before joining the diplomatic mission. He knew what asteroid mining looked like. The images Thexani was showing were wrong. The holes were too deep and too wide. Human mining equipment made smaller, cleaner cuts. These looked like they had been made by fragment crystal boring tools. Dr. Yoon pulled up her own files on the tablet. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. She found the original survey data from the mining sites. Every asteroid had been scanned 3 times. There were no artificial structures, no signs of previous visitation, no markers indicating sacred ground. The Fragment Collective had never claimed these areas before. She leaned over and whispered to Ambassador Kang. His eyes widened slightly as he read the data. Then his diplomatic smile became very thin and very cold. Counselor Thexani, Kang said, his voice still polite but with an edge like a knife. Our surveys of these areas were extensive. We found no indication of sacred sites or previous claims. Perhaps you could provide us with the original documentation of these sites? The Ixani's crystal form flickered with different colors. The sacred nature of these sites is well known among civilized species. Only barbarians would fail to recognize their significance. More alien voices joined in agreement. The reptilian Vorthak representative hissed his support. The insectoid hive speaker clicked approvingly. Even some of the smaller species that usually stayed quiet were making noise. Communications. Officer Kim Min-ji was typing fast on her keyboard. She was sending encrypted messages back to Earth, but she was also doing something else. Her communication equipment could pick up radio signals from all over the chamber. Right now, she was hearing private conversations between council members. What she heard made her blood turn cold. The Fragment Collective had been planning this accusation for weeks. They had damaged the asteroid sites themselves, using their own equipment to make it look like human machines had done it. Other council members knew about the plan and were helping to make it work. Kim looked around the chamber and realized something terrible. This wasn't about mining rights or sacred sites. This was about keeping humanity in its place. The council species didn't want humans to grow stronger or more independent. They wanted to keep humans as servants. Medical Officer Rumi Young was sitting in the back, trying to stay calm. But her medical training made her think about the bigger picture. If the council was lying about this, what else were they lying about? She thought about the medical supplies that kept getting delayed, the safety inspections that took months instead of days, the medicine that arrived too late to save lives. Maybe those delays weren't mistakes. Maybe they were on purpose. Security. Chief Lin Dong-wook was watching the council members carefully. His job was to protect the human delegation, but right now he was more worried about protecting all of humanity. The way the aliens were looking at the humans had changed. Before, they looked at humans like children who needed guidance. Now they looked at humans like problems that needed to be solved. Ambassador Kang stood up again. The chamber fell quiet, waiting to hear what he would say. Everyone expected him to apologize and promise to do better. That's what humans always did in these situations. Counselor Thexani, Kang said, his voice very quiet and very controlled. I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. You are saying that the Fragment Collective marked these asteroid sites as sacred over 1,000 years ago? That is correct, Thexani replied, his crystal body glowing with confidence. And this information was available to any species that requested it? Of course. Sacred sites are protected under galactic law. Dr. Yoon was typing on her tablet, pulling up galactic law databases. Her face was getting paler as she read. Kang nodded slowly. I see. and the Fragment Collective reported the destruction of these sites when it first happened. The Ixani hesitated for just a moment. The discovery was made recently during a routine survey. A routine survey, Kong repeated, of asteroids that were supposedly sacred for 1,000 years. Captain Lee was beginning to understand what was happening. His military mind started working through the implications. If the Council was willing to lie about this, they were willing to lie about anything. That meant humanity couldn't trust any of the agreements they had made. It meant the Council saw humans as enemies, not allies. Dr. Park was thinking about all the scientific data she had shared with the Council over the past 3 years. Information about human biology, human technology, human weaknesses. She had shared it freely because she thought they were all friends working together. Now she realized she had been giving away military secrets to potential enemies. Engineer Cho leaned forward in his seat. He could see the change happening in the human delegation below. Their body language was different now. They were sitting straighter, moving more carefully, watching everything with sharp eyes. It reminded him of workers he had seen just before. A big accident when everyone suddenly realized the safety systems had failed and they were in real danger. Ambassador Kang looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Some looked guilty, others looked angry. A few looked scared, as if they were worried about what might happen next. "I want to thank the Council for bringing this matter to our attention," Kang said. His voice was still polite, but there was something underneath it now. Something that made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Humanity takes our responsibilities very seriously. We will, of course, investigate this matter thoroughly." He paused and looked directly at the Ixani, very thoroughly. Kim Min-ji was still listening to the private communications between council members. What she heard next made her hands shake as she typed out, "They weren't just planning to keep humans weak. They were planning to take away the territories humanity already had. The mining rights, the trade routes, even the colonies where human families lived. The Council was going to declare humanity unfit for galactic civilization and divide human space among themselves. She sent an emergency message to Earth with the highest priority code." Then she looked at Ambassador Kang and saw that his diplomatic smile was finally completely gone. The breaking point had been reached. Fleet Admiral Nam Ji-woo had been sitting quietly in the observer section of the council chambers. She wore a simple navy blue uniform with only a few small medals. Most people who saw her would think she was just another mid-level military officer. They would be very wrong. Admiral Nam commanded the entire human space fleet. Every ship, every space station, every military base in human territory reported to her. She had been invited to this council session as a courtesy observer, but really, she was here to watch and learn. What she was learning today was very disturbing. A soft beep came from the communication device on her wrist. She looked down and read the message that appeared on the small screen. Her face went very pale, then very hard. She stood up and walked quickly down to the main floor where the human delegation sat. Ambassador Kang saw her coming and knew something important was happening. Admiral Nam didn't move fast unless there was a real emergency. She leaned down and whispered something in his ear. As she spoke, his diplomatic smile finally disappeared completely. Dr. Seo Byung-ho was the human expert on galactic communications. He worked from a small office on Earth, monitoring radio signals from across the galaxy. Most of the time, his job was boring. He listened to weather reports, shipping schedules, and alien soap operas. But today, he had discovered something that changed everything. For the past 6 months, Dr. Seo had been tracking secret communications between the council species. At first, he thought they were just normal diplomatic messages. But as he decoded more and more of them, a terrible picture began to form. The council members had been planning humanity's downfall for almost a year. They called it the human problem. In their private messages, they were afraid that humans were growing too strong and too independent. They wanted to keep humanity weak and dependent on council approval for everything. The message Admiral Nam had received contained Dr. S. findings. Hundreds of intercepted communications proving that the council had been working together to stop human expansion. They had been delaying supplies to human colonies on purpose. They had been blocking trade agreements that would help humanity. They had even been sharing information about how to attack human ships if necessary. Ambassador Kong stood up slowly. The entire chamber was watching him, waiting to see what humanity would do about the accusations of destroying sacred sites. Everyone expected him to apologize and beg for forgiveness. That's what humans always did. Instead, he spoke in a voice that was calm and clear and very, very cold. "Esteemed council members," he said, "I have just received some very interesting information about recent communications regarding humanity's status in this galaxy." Counselor Zephmos of the Skyborn people ruffled his bright blue feathers nervously. He was a bird-like creature with sharp eyes and a hooked beak. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Ambassador." "I'm sure you don't," Kang replied, "Lieutenant." Commander Hanbyo Young was the human technical specialist. She had been quiet during most of the session, working on her portable computer. Now she stood up and activated the main holographic display system in the center of the chamber. Suddenly, the air above the council filled with images and text. These were copies of the intercepted messages Dr. Seo had decoded. Messages between council members discussing the human problem, plans to keep humanity from expanding, discussions about which council species would get which human territories after humanity was declared unfit for civilization. The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens were shouting, clicking, hissing, and chirping all at once. Some were angry that their secret plans had been discovered. Others were scared about what humanity might do now that they knew the truth. Captain Lee Junho stood at attention next to Ambassador Kong. His military training had taught him to stay calm in dangerous situations. Right now, he knew this was very dangerous. The human delegation was surrounded by thousands of aliens who had been planning to destroy humanity. But he wasn't afraid. He was angry. Dr. Park So-ra was no longer the friendly scientist who made polite conversation with alien researchers. She was taking detailed notes about every council member's reaction to the revelation. She was identifying which species had been part of the conspiracy and which ones looked surprised by the news. This information would be very important for humanity's future communications. Officer Kim Min-ji was working faster than she ever had before. She was recording everything that was happening and transmitting it back to Earth in real time. She was also broadcasting the intercepted messages on all galactic communication frequencies. Soon, every species in the galaxy would know what the Council had been planning. The crystalline Nexani was flashing angry red colors. "These allegations are outrageous. The Fragment Collective demands that this illegal surveillance be investigated." "Illegal?" Ambassador Kang asked. "According to galactic law, communications sent on open frequencies are public information. Dr. Seo was monitoring public broadcasts, not breaking into private systems." Dr. Yoon Hae-won looked up from her tablet with a thin smile. "Galactic Communication Code, Section 47, Subsection 12, she said. "Any species may monitor radio transmissions that are not properly encrypted. It's been the law for over 200 years. Several council members looked very uncomfortable. They had been so confident in their secret planning that they had forgotten to encrypt their messages properly. Security Chief Lim Dong-wook was watching the chamber exits and counting alien security guards. His job was to protect the human delegation, but he was starting to wonder if they would be allowed to leave the chamber alive. The council members were looking more angry and desperate by the minute. Medical Officer Rumi Young was thinking about the human colonies that had been denied medical supplies. Now she knew it wasn't bureaucratic incompetence. It was deliberate sabotage. People had died because the council wanted to keep humanity weak. The anger she felt was like a fire burning in her chest. Ambassador Kang continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly through the noisy chamber. "For 3 years, humanity has operated under the assumption that we were part of a galactic community. We believed that the Council's delays and restrictions were based on legitimate concerns about our development as a species." He paused and looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. "We now understand that we were wrong. The Council's concerns were not about our development. They were about our independence. Engineer Cho Sung-min watched from the gallery as something remarkable happened. All the humans in the chamber began moving differently. They stood straighter, moved more purposefully, and watched everything with sharp, alert eyes. It was like watching a group of workers suddenly realize that their safety equipment had been sabotaged. They were still doing their jobs, but now they were ready for anything. Counselor Veltar of the Depths waved his tentacles angrily. These accusations are based on misunderstood communications taken out of context. The Council has always acted in humanity's best interests. Have you? Ambassador Kang asked quietly. Lieutenant Commander Han activated another display. This one showed shipping records and supply manifests. It proved that medical supplies for human colonies had been deliberately delayed. Food shipments had been held up for additional inspections that served no purpose except to make humans suffer. The evidence was overwhelming. For months, the Council had been slowly strangling human colonies, hoping to make humanity so dependent on Council aid that they would never be able to resist. Council control. Dr. Seo's intercepted messages included something even worse. The Council had been planning to declare a health emergency in human space. They would claim that humans were spreading dangerous diseases and needed to be quarantined. This would give them legal justification to take control of all human territories. Ambassador Kang reached up and removed the small pin from his jacket. It was the symbol of his diplomatic status, showing that he spoke for all of humanity. He placed it carefully on the podium in front of him. The Human Colonial Union hereby withdraws all pending requests before this council, he announced. The chamber fell silent. Even the air circulation system seemed to stop working. Counselor Veltar laughed, a wet bubbling sound. And what will you do instead, young species? Hide in your small corner of space and sulk? The silence that followed was the most frightening thing any of the council members had ever heard. Dr. Seo activated the main display one more time. What appeared made every alien in the chamber go very, very still. It was a map of human space. But it wasn't the small area the Council thought humans controlled. The map showed human mining operations, research stations, and defense platforms scattered across dozens of star systems. Human space had grown to 3 times its original size, and the Council had never noticed. We've been busy, Ambassador, Kang said with cold politeness. And for the first time in 3 years, the humans were no longer asking for permission. The Council chamber was in chaos. Aliens were shouting in dozens of different languages. Some were standing on their seats, others were waving tentacles or wings in the air. The noise was like being inside a thunderstorm made of angry voices. Dr. Yang Kite had been sitting quietly in the back of the human section. He was a small, thin man who wore simple glasses and looked like a college professor. Most people who met him thought he taught mathematics or history. They were wrong. Dr. Yang was humanity's top military analyst, and he had been studying the Council's weaknesses for 3 years. Now he stood up and walked to the front of the chamber. In his hands, he carried a simple folder filled with papers. The folder looked innocent, but what was inside would change everything. Ambassador Kang saw Dr. Yang approaching and nodded. Dr. Yang has additional information that the Council should hear. Dr. Yang opened his folder and began to speak. His voice was quiet, but somehow it cut through all the noise in the chamber. For the past year, I have been analyzing casualty reports from human colonies in the Outer Rim territories. He activated a holographic display that showed medical statistics. Numbers and charts filled the air above the chamber. In the past 12 months, 847 humans have died from preventable diseases. These deaths occurred because medical supplies were delayed by Council safety inspections that served no actual safety purpose. The chamber began to quiet down as the aliens realized what Dr. Yang was saying. The average delay for medical supplies to human colonies has been 127 days. During the same period, medical supplies to Council member species have averaged 12 days. This difference cannot be explained by distance, transportation difficulties, or legitimate safety concerns. Medical Officer Ru Mi-young felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. She had suspected that the delays were on purpose, but seeing the numbers made it real. 847 people dead. Men, women, children who could have been saved if medicine had arrived on time. Dr. Yang continued reading from his papers. His voice stayed calm and professional, but his words were like hammer blows. Colony 7 requested insulin for diabetic patients. The request was approved, but the shipment was delayed for additional purity testing. 17 people died waiting for medicine that was already proven safe. Colony 12 needed antibiotics for a bacterial infection spreading through their water system. The medicine was held for cultural sensitivity review to make sure it was appropriate for human use. 31 people died, including 8 children. Colony 15 requested surgical equipment for emergency operations. The equipment was delayed for technology assessment to ensure humans were qualified to use it. 42 people died from injuries that could have been easily treated. The numbers kept coming. Each statistic represented real people who had died because the council wanted to keep humanity weak and dependent. Councillor Lexani tried to interrupt. These are tragic accidents, but medical supply chains are complex. They are not accidents. Dr. Yang said quietly. He pulled out another set of papers. I have the original inspection reports. The medical supplies sent to human colonies received the same safety ratings as supplies sent to other species. But only the human shipments were held for additional delays. Captain Lee Junho was standing very still, but his hands were clenched into fists. As a military officer, he had sworn to protect human lives. Learning that 847 people had died because of council sabotage made him want to do something violent, but he stayed in control. For now, Dr. Yang wasn't finished. He had spent months preparing for this moment, and he was going to share everything. He had learned the delays were not random. They followed a specific pattern designed to cause maximum suffering while maintaining the appearance of bureaucratic incompetence. He showed charts that proved the delays always happened at the worst possible times. When colonies were dealing with disease outbreaks, their medicine was held up. When they had accidents and needed surgical supplies, the equipment was detained for extra inspections. When they had food shortages, nutrition supplements were delayed for quality control. This was not bureaucracy, Dr. Yang concluded. This was biological warfare. The council chamber went completely silent. Even the most nervous aliens stopped making noise. Everyone understood what Dr. Yang had just said. The council hadn't just been delaying human expansion. They had been slowly killing human colonists. Councillor Veltar of the Depths rose from his water tank. His voice came out wet and angry. These are serious accusations that require proper investigation through appropriate channels. The appropriate channel, Captain Lee interrupted, would have been honesty from the beginning. Security Chief Lim Dongwook noticed something important. Every human in the chamber was now moving with military precision. Even the scientists and diplomats were standing straighter, watching more carefully, and positioning themselves near exits or defensive positions. It was like watching a switch being flipped inside all of them at the same time. Engineer Cho Seung-min watched from the gallery as the human delegation transformed. These were the same people who had been polite and friendly just an hour ago. Now they looked like soldiers preparing for war. The change was complete and frightening. Dr. Park So-ra was no longer taking polite notes about alien customs. She was creating a detailed intelligence report about each council species. Their physical weaknesses, their technology limitations, their political divisions. Information that could be very useful if humanity needed to defend itself. Communications. Officer Kim Min-ji was broadcasting everything to human colonies across the galaxy. Every human settlement was learning about the Council's betrayal at the same time. She was also monitoring alien communications, and what she heard was very interesting. Many of the smaller alien species were shocked by the revelations. They hadn't known about the conspiracy against humanity. Ambassador Kong looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Many looked guilty or scared. A few looked angry that their plans had been discovered. But some looked confused and upset. as if they were learning about the conspiracy for the first time. For 3 years, Kang said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber, humanity has operated under several assumptions. We assumed that the Council's delays were caused by careful consideration of complex issues. We assumed that the inspections and reviews were necessary for galactic safety. We assumed that the Council wanted humanity to succeed and grow strong. He paused and removed his diplomatic credentials from his jacket pocket, the small card that gave him the right to speak for all humanity. We now know that all of these assumptions were wrong. Dr. Yang activated one final display. This one showed the real scope of the Council's conspiracy. It wasn't just about medical supplies or mining rights. The Council had been planning to declare humanity biologically dangerous and quarantine all human space. They would claim that humans carried diseases that threatened other species. This would give them legal justification to take control of every human colony. The plan was to be implemented next month, Dr. Yang said. All human territories would be placed under Council management for public health reasons. Human families would be relocated to designated areas for medical observation. Human space would be divided among Council member species. The implications were clear. The Council hadn't just been planning to keep humanity weak. They had been planning to destroy humanity as an independent species. Lieutenant Commander Han Bo-young stood up and began packing her equipment. Her movements were quick and efficient. She was getting ready to leave, and she wasn't planning to ask permission. Medical Officer Ru thought about the families in the outer colonies who had lost children to preventable diseases. She thought about the doctors who had begged for supplies that never came. She thought about the 847 people who had died because aliens wanted to play political games with human lives. Admiral Nam walked over to Ambassador Kang and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and looked up at the Council members who were watching nervously. The Human Colonial Union wishes to thank the Council for this educational experience, Kang said with deadly politeness. We have learned a great deal about galactic civilization today. He stood up and placed his diplomatic credentials on the podium. We will not be seeking Council approval for our activities going forward. Councillor Zephmos flapped his wings frantically. You cannot simply leave. There are protocols, procedures, laws. Ambassador Kang turned back one last time. His face was calm, but his eyes were like ice. Counselor, humanity has been following your protocols for 3 years. Starting now, we will be following our own. And with that, the age of asking permission was over. The human delegation began to leave the council chamber. They moved together like a military unit, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. Ambassador Kang led the way, walking with steady steps toward the main exit. Behind him, the other humans followed in perfect formation. The council members watched in growing panic as they realized what was happening. For 3 years, they had controlled humanity through bureaucracy and false friendship. Now the humans were walking away, and there was nothing the council could do to stop them. Councillor Veltar rose from his water tank, tentacles waving frantically. You cannot leave. There are agreements, treaties, legal obligations. Admiral Nam turned around and looked at the octopus-like creature. Her voice was calm but cold as winter. Our legal obligations were to follow galactic law and respect council authority. We have done both. Galactic law gives us the right to withdraw from council proceedings at any time. As for respecting council authority, she paused and looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. That respect was earned through 3 years of lies, sabotage, and the deaths of 847 human beings. We consider the debt paid in full. Dr. Park Sora was walking near the back of the group. As they moved toward the exit, she was still taking notes. But now she was documenting which alien species looked ashamed, which looked angry, and which looked scared. This information would help humanity decide which species might become future allies and which would always be enemies. Communications. Officer Kim Minji had her portable transmitter working at full power. She was broadcasting everything that happened to human colonies across the galaxy. Every human settlement was watching their delegation walk out of the council chamber with dignity and strength. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist. Captain Li Junho walked with military precision, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. He knew that desperate aliens might try to stop the human delegation by force, but he also knew that Admiral Nam had been very busy during the 3 years of diplomatic talks. If any alien tried to attack the humans, they would get a very unpleasant surprise. Engineer Cho Sung-min watched from the gallery as the transformation of the human delegation completed itself. These people had entered the chamber as polite diplomats, begging for scraps of territory. They were leaving as representatives of a strong, independent civilization that would not be controlled by anyone. Counselor Vexania's crystal body was flashing angry red colors. The Fragment Collective will not tolerate this insult. We demand sanctions. We demand investigation. We demand— You demand nothing, Dr. Yang Kite said quietly. He had stopped walking and turned to face the crystalline alien. For 3 years, humanity has listened to your demands. We have followed your rules. We have accepted your delays and inspections and bureaucratic games. We did this because we believed you were acting in good faith. His voice stayed calm, but everyone in the chamber could hear the steel underneath. We now know that your good faith was a lie. Your concern for galactic safety was a lie. Your friendship was a lie. Everything you told us was designed to keep us weak while you planned our destruction. Dr. Yang looked around the chamber at all the council members. We are done listening to your demands. Security Chief Lim Dongwook was watching the alien security guards positioned around the chamber. They looked confused and uncertain. Their orders had been to keep the peace during a normal diplomatic session. Nobody had told them what to do. If humanity simply decided to leave, Medical Officer Ru Mi-young was thinking about the medical supplies that were probably sitting in council warehouses right now. Supplies that could save lives in human colonies. Supplies that would be delayed for more inspections while people died waiting for help. Dr. Yang, she said quietly, what about the medical supplies currently being held for inspection? Dr. Yang smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Admiral Nam has been coordinating with our logistics teams. Human medical supplies will no longer go through council inspection facilities. We have established our own distribution network. Lieutenant Commander Hanba Oh-young was carrying her technical equipment toward the exit. As she walked, she was sending coded signals to human ships positioned throughout the galaxy. The signals were simple. Courteous mode off. Proceed with independent operations. Across human space, ships began moving. Mining vessels that had been waiting for council permission started extracting resources from unclaimed asteroids. Research stations that had been submitting reports to council oversight committees stopped sending updates. Defense platforms that had been powered down to avoid appearing aggressive came back online. The change was happening everywhere at once. Humanity was no longer asking permission. Councillor Zephmos flapped his wings desperately. This is illegal. You cannot expand without council approval. You cannot operate independent mining operations. You cannot— We can, Ambassador Kong said without stopping or turning around. Galactic Law Section 15 gives any spacefaring species the right to claim unclaimed territories. Section 23 allows independent resource extraction in unoccupied systems. Section 31 permits self-defense installations in sovereign space. Dr. Yoon Hae-won looked up from her tablet and smiled. We've been studying galactic law very carefully for 3 years, Counselor. We know our rights. The human delegation reached the main exit of the council chamber. As they passed through the doorway, each person felt like they were leaving an old life behind and starting a new one. For 3 years, they had been junior partners in galactic civilization. Now they were equals. Admiral Nam stopped at the threshold and turned back to address the council one final time. The Human Colonial Union extends an offer of fair and equitable trade to any species interested in genuine partnership. We will treat our friends with respect and our enemies with the consequences they have earned. She paused and looked directly At Counselor Veltar, we will not be seeking council approval for our activities going forward, but we will be watching very carefully to see how you treat other young species who come after us. The warning was clear. If the council tried to sabotage another developing civilization the way they had sabotaged humanity, there would be consequences. As the humans left the chamber, Communications Officer Kim picked up something interesting on the alien communication channels. Several of the smaller council species were sending private messages to each other. They were talking about opening direct diplomatic relations with humanity, bypassing the council completely. The conspiracy against humanity had been led by the 5 most powerful council species. But there were dozens of smaller species who had been controlled by the same bullying tactics. Now that humanity had shown it was possible to stand up to the council, other species were thinking about doing the same thing. Engineer Cho smiled as he watched the human delegation walk away with their heads held high. They had entered the chamber as supplicants. They were leaving as equals. And behind them they left a council that was beginning to realize they had made a terrible mistake. In the days that followed, human colonies across the galaxy received emergency supply shipments from human vessels. No more delays. No more inspections. No more bureaucratic games. Families that had been waiting months for medicine received it within days. Human mining operations expanded into dozens of unclaimed systems. Human research stations began projects that had been under council review for years. Human defense. Fleets took positions to protect human space from any species foolish enough to test their new independence. The council tried to organize sanctions against humanity, but they discovered something important. Many alien species depended on human trade and human technology. The sanctions hurt the council more than they hurt humanity. 3 months later, 12 species withdrew from the council and formed new trade partnerships with humanity. 6 months. After that, the council began sending diplomatic messages asking if humanity would consider renegotiating the terms of galactic cooperation. Humanity's response was polite but firm. We are always interested in fair partnerships with honest species. When the council is ready to deal with us as equals rather than subjects, we will be happy to talk. The age of human courtesy was over. But the age of human strength had just begun. Security Chief Lim made a final note in his report that day. Recommendation: never mistake human politeness for weakness. We are capable of being civilized. We are also capable of being something else entirely. The choice of which side you see depends entirely on how you choose to treat us. The council had learned this lesson too late. But they had learned it well. And across the galaxy, other young species watched and learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate someone who has been polite for too long.